So that was always from the jump. That was my goal. Immortalize yourself. Like, you have, but we live to die. You don't have much information on when your time is.
Yes.
Right. So for me, it was just like I had to really grind it out, and I was like, I'm touching everybody. Like, I'm gonna photograph all of hip hop, right? And I haven't even stopped that journey. I'm still in it.
Yes. Peace, everyone. Welcome to Masters of Ceremony. I'm your host, Andrew Ascaripour, and I'm so excited to release this week's episode with my dear brother, the extremely talented Sen Floyd. Sen Floyd is one of the most amazing photographers and videographers I personally know from New York. He's a very dear friend of mine, and I always knew he was somebody who I wanted to get on the podcast because he's not only an amazing visual artist, but he's someone who has a deep understanding about how the way we live our lives and how spiritual practices and awareness can impact everything we do in life. And I think that really shows clearly through his work. So for context, I do want to share that we recorded this podcast back in 2020, but I truly believe that everything we discussed here was timeless, and I'm so excited to finally be releasing this episode. Some of the things we discussed were how Sen was raised in a health-conscious and spiritually aware household and how that impacted him. We went into his early beginnings and passions into photography and videography, and how the mentors that he had access to really instilled a sense of confidence into his work. We went on to speak about how during around 2015 or so, Sen really began to document the emerging New York hip-hop scene of the times. And I can attest to Sen's incredible outwork during this time because I was documenting a lot of the same artists and was in a lot of the same circles, and Sen was just a beast during that whole era of New York hip hop and continues to be. So we spoke about how he has always had the willingness just to document the times and work with any artist who he really believed in and help add to their legacy, not only his own. We went on to speak about legacy and how in these days and times we're very caught up with instant gratification and immediate praise, and how the kind of work him and I really want to put out is the work that is going to stand the test of time. We went on to speak about how him going through his entire journey with mixed martial arts and practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu really served as and continues to serve as a spiritual doctrine for him and has impacted every other facet of his life. And getting a chance to really delve into how Sen spends his days and his mentality and his lifestyle and seeing how all of that impacts his work was, for me, one of the highlights of this podcast. We also spoke about how Sen has already begun mentoring young teens on photography and video and everything that has provided to him as a teacher. We spoke about Sen's meditation practice and how that's radically allowed him to achieve most of what he's sought out to achieve and plans to achieve throughout his life. And I really love to hear what Sen had to say about meditation. We spoke about advice to young photographers regarding workflow and how to establish a healthy and trustful connection to your subjects, and really so much more. I just really hope you guys enjoy this episode with Sen. I don't think it's only for photographers. I think it's for anybody who's needing a little bit of inspiration or motivation to chase their dreams. And it was such a pleasure getting to sit down with my brother and have this amazing conversation. I hope you guys enjoy. Yo, Sen.
Or man,
my brother, welcome to Masters of Ceremony, man.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course, man. It's an honor to have another photographer who I have so much respect for and who I have shared so many different
Appreciate it, man.
Memories with, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course.
Man. Thank you for having me, man. We always talk about moments and conversations that we have, which are like brief moments in time, but they kind of like last, a lifetime for me.
Of course. Yeah, man. For me, that's been one of the most special things with this podcast is to document some of these conversations and to have them last a lifetime and be able to be replayed by people. And
Yeah.
I mean, you and I both know, as people who study other artists of our crafts, how valuable even just like a 30-minute interview is for our motivation, you know?
Yeah.
And for me, it's just a big blessing to be able to sit down with people like you and be able to create this documentation for others to receive inspiration by. Yeah, man. So I guess I have so many questions for you.
Okay.
But we obviously only have so much time. So I want to be a little bit concise in this interview. But I would love to ask you to speak about some of your upbringing and some of how your family influence encouraged you to not only get into photography, but encouraged you to have the motivation that you have for life. Because you seem like someone who has that mentality of, I'm going to go and get it and not wait for anybody to give it to me. So how was that instilled within you from a young age?
Well, growing up, I grew up in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn, and both of my parents were oddballs in their families. Especially my mom, right? I grew up like living different from everybody in my school and around me. My neighborhood, I grew up vegan. I was born vegan.
Wow.
You know, my parents didn't believe in giving me vaccines and shots and stuff like that. So I'm like one of those babies from the 90s eras whose parents were like deemed crazy, who didn't give their babies like vaccines and stuff like that.
Meanwhile, they were pretty sane, but
but yeah, like just them choosing a very unique and I guess a unique position to life, right? Or a unique approach to life kind of made me an oddball, you know, and kind of like influenced my thinking to think out the box, right? So in terms of like influencing my work and my photography, I always would like to like approach things from a esoteric, like, you know, oddball way, you know. Even in my work, like for doing portraits, right? For me, it takes time for me to warm up to even want to photograph someone. So sitting down and getting to know them, studying, you know, who the person is. That's all ingrained in me, and that's all from my parents. And my parents are just reading people, you know. So that's that aspect that comes from them. I wasn't really planning to be a photographer at heart. I was gonna be like a plumber. I was gonna be a plumber.
That was the aspiration.
That was the aspiration. Wow. I was to start a business. So I was gonna get like a license to become a plumber and an electrician and start businesses all over, like, you know, New York. But photography, when it was introduced to me, kind of found me. I just fell in love with it quickly, and I excelled at it.
What age would you say this was at?
I was 15. I was around entering high school, and you know, I've never been the most studious student. You know, I was into graffiti around 15, so I had like a little crew and stuff like that, and it got me in a ton of trouble.
I'm sure.
But
you were always artistic in a sense.
Always artistic in a sense, and I give that kudos to my mother for just trying different things. She put me in everything, like gymnastics and, you know, different sports. And, oh, you don't like this, so let's try something else out. And she was also a traveler. So, like, not bringing me in terms of, like, outside of the United States, but all over New York. So my exposure to culture and other people came from her. You know, like, she loved to come out of her apartment and just take the A train and get off random stops and just walk the neighborhoods and just experience the air and the people. And I was always on her hip. You know, I was tied to my mother's hip. So that early exposure to like different New York cultures and the diversity, it really helped influence my work, how it is today.
Yeah, I can see that easily through just your the way you photograph, specifically your portraits, and even just your angles and the way you approach your subjects. It's not in a cookie cutter, traditional kind of sense. So I can see that centrism, as you speak about, be evoked through your photography. And Where were your parents from, if I can ask?
My parents are from here, actually.
Okay.
My mom is from down south. My dad is from the Bronx.
Yeah.
His parents come from North Carolina. And African American, but there's some Native American in there from my father's side.
Beautiful, man.
But my father's from Panama.
Okay, dope. Yeah. So cool to hear how they raised you, to raise you with a level of consciousness and awareness about the physical and the spiritual that differs from most parents' parenting advice in the West.
Yeah.
That's a real blessing, man, because I feel like a lot of people are chasing some of that wisdom in their adult years. And it seems like you were able to receive some of it, at least from a young age.
A lot of it I didn't appreciate.
But looking back,
looking back now, I'm just like, oh wow, like, because now being vegan and eating healthy is a trend. But when I was younger, people would be like, what's that you're eating, and all types of stuff. But it really helped shape me. So. Yeah,
for sure, man. Even like growing up with a Caribbean grandmother and her knowing all the bush plants and medicine, you know, you have a cold, you have a fever, you're not going to CVS, you're going to the jungle to retrieve some plants to help you. That upbringing is very different than what's in the West. And as adults, we can't take it for granted. Yeah, so as you got this first camera you speak about, or you started to begin shooting around 15, was it stills off the bat that you were mostly focused on, or was there a shift that happened where you said, I want to get into video?
It was mostly stills in the beginning. I credit my inspiration for video work to one of my mentors, my first mentor, Jared Lavelle. He worked at Studio Museum. I got started introduced into photography through a program called Expanding the Walls up in Harlem. So I would come all the way from Flatbush. I went to school in Flatbush, and I would get on the Q train, take it all the way up to Harlem, and be in this program. And Lavelle played this movie for me. Everybody in the class fell asleep but me. And I just remember it was the movie's called Baraka, right?
Crazy.
Inspirational. And from there, that kind of like fueled me to want to get into like motion work. I didn't hop right into it right away, but always in the back of my mind. Like, I watched that movie religiously, literally for a whole year. Yeah. I just kept coming back to it.
It's a long movie.
It's a long movie. But like, I just kept watching it. And it was 15, like being exposed to that at 15, just seeing, whoa, the possibilities. Like, Ron Frick is a genius. And I credit all that to Lavelle. Yeah.
Wow. So after that, you wanted to get into cinematography.
100%.
Wow. And when you started to go to school after high school, where did you decide to go, and where did you go for, or what did you go for?
So I didn't go the traditional route. I went to a place called Film Connection Institution, and that was an online school. But at the same time, that institution gave me the opportunity to have mentors, right? And my mentor just so happened to share a studio space with other people in the field alike. So my mentor was a cinematographer, and by the name of Russell Geltman. And he had a partner named Adam, who was a producer, and then he hired a whole bunch of people. So there was like, Steadicam operators, focus pullers. There was a commercial photographer in there, and I just was the guinea pig. So I was working, clean up the storage room. So you're in there with all the equipment, you take stuff out and you try to try it on, and just soaking all that up. Like, I was on set every single day, just soaking up as much knowledge as I could. And I was around like 17, 18, just being exposed to that.
Oh, wow. So early.
Very early.
Yeah, and to be able to work on such vast sets, that's a blessing, man. Very different from myself and many other people who just start with a single DSLR and are just filming in that sense. To learn real studio operations is different. I feel like that also translates through a lot of your work, because I feel like you have a great skill at just lighting your subjects in a beautiful way. Yeah. Maybe you acquired that through some of your early years as well.
I definitely got lighting and gaffing from being in that program. So,
dope. When did you start creating some of your own content, and maybe specifically, when did you start getting into documenting hip hop culture out here in New York?
Man.
Because that was my introduction to you. For the people who are listening now, when I became aware of you, it was as a cinematographer and director working for different hip hop artists here in Brooklyn and elsewhere. I didn't even know you did photography until a little bit later on. But looking into your career now and looking back a bit, I can see that there was some type of catalyst within the music culture and you starting to translate your work to focus a lot on musical artists. So when and how did that happen?
That was late 2014. I had just finished my program and I got my, my certificate. But I no longer wanted to work at the studio I was working at. It wasn't speaking to my heart. So I ended up coming out of that and I wanted to go back into school again, but I didn't get accepted into the school I wanted to get into. So I ended up around the same time, around my birthday, I had lost my grandmother then. And I remember kind of meeting this group called Loaf Music, right, through a mutual friend called Cisco, shot by Cisco. It's my homie, right? And he worked a lot with them. And they were looking for like a cinematographer for a music video. And I signed on and it was just like magic. It clicked.
Yeah.
But I always wanted to improve my still work because I kind of felt like I had a good sense of like the cinema world. Even though I didn't have like a lot of personal work in the cinema world, I kind of wanted to grow my still work. And for me, I can't focus on 9 different things. I have to hone in on one. I have to master one and then go to the next. So I kind of like left doing commercial work and working as an AC, and I went into just shooting stills. And that was around 2015. And 2015 was the bulk of most of my work that you probably know me for.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was a crazy year. I had the opportunity to photograph so many different, upcoming artists.
Landing some big cover art.
Loving big cover art videos. Yeah. It was crazy. Like, I got published a lot that year. And it kind of bled over into these years later, 5 years later. So 2015 was the bulk of the year in which a lot of my work came out.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I feel like when I came on to your work, I saw a lot of similarities because I felt like we were both young photographers documenting this reemergence of hip hop in New York among people our age and documenting this renaissance that was happening from Brooklyn to Queens to the Bronx. And photographing many of the same artists. And I felt like we were both very consciously trying to document this scene in as many different artists as possible.
That's what
I was like,
that was exactly what it is.
I respect this dude a lot for that because I'm trying to do the same because not only for our own careers, but it was ill, like especially in 2015, 2016 amongst our circle.
Yeah, it was.
And your work was just consistently popping up.
Appreciate it, man.
But even beyond that, how was your love and passion for hip hop fueling your desire to photograph this culture?
I've always been a fan of hip hop since young. And what actually got me into music, again, I have to credit my mother for this because I remember this day clearly. I remember being at Best Buy, 23rd Street off the F line. And I think Lil Wayne, the Carter 1 or 2 was coming out. And I wanted to get that album, but my mother is old school. She wasn't a fan of the cursing. So she picked me up a random album, and it was Common, Finding Forever.
Wow.
Right? And she was just like, I'll get you this. I had no idea who Common was. I was like listening. I was a huge fan then. I was a huge fan of like Soulja Boy and, like the little bounce scene.
Yeah,
right?
the ringtone music that was
cool back then. But I remember getting that Common album, and I played it religiously for weeks. And then I started doing research. Who's Dilla, right? Like who's Slum Village? Getting into Kanye, like going back into the vault. And through that, because I used to go to school in Flatbush, around like Flatbush and Fenimore. So I'd take the shuttle train. So I walked to the train to Franklin Avenue, right? And on Franklin, there was a record store that used to be there. It's not there no more. But there was a guy named Israel who ran a record, like a home, a home record store shop. in the ground. So like the gate
Wow.
opens up, you walk downstairs, and there's just records plastered everywhere.
Wow.
Right? And I had no idea who a lot of these artists were, but I was just attracted to the LP covers. So the first record I picked up was like Mace. I picked up a Biggie Smalls album, and I picked up I think it was a Wu-Tang album. It was a single though. I think it might have been Guillotine Swords,
no doubt.
right?
Yep.
And I just remember I played it on my mom's record
Turntable.
turntable, and that was it.
Yeah,
that was
you
it.
were
So
hooked.
from there, I was 8th grade. So from there, I just every time I had $5, $2, I stop in there, pick up mad records, pick up records. To this day, I still have collections. Like I have a large collection now.
For sure.
But to that really like it was from finding Forever into everything else.
Yeah.
That kind of just really like fueled my love to like photograph hip hop.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be the guy who had album covers. You know, like I didn't want to do like regular photos. I wanted to have album covers that would be all over the world.
Yep.
And I wanted to inspire somebody one day, and it's just so it sat up on the world, because for me, it was always, the goal was always to immortalize myself, you know?
From the jump.
From the jump.
I think about longevity.
Longevity. It's never about the short-term goal. For me, is I like to shoot for the future. So some of my work, it may not pop off right now, but 10 years later, there's going to be a historian, someone who goes back and go, wait a minute, this guy was consistent from 2015 to 2020, right? And the bulk of his work photographed this entire scene, which took off, right?
Yep.
Kind of like what Chimo do, and kind of like what Jonathan Mannion did.
Of course.
You know? So that was always from the jump, that was my goal. Immortalize yourself. Like, you know, you have, but you know, you know, we live to die. You don't have much information on when your time is.
Yes.
Right? So for me, it was just like I had to really grind it out, and I was like, I'm touching everybody. Like I'm gonna photograph all of hip hop. Right? And I haven't even stopped that journey. I'm still in it.
Yes.
So yeah, that the music's definitely been the fuel, you know,
Yeah.
like music's definitely been the fuel, and I'm a huge hip hop fan. I mean,
Of course,
big
man. We
hip
see
hop
it, man.
fan, big hip hop fan,
For
big
sure.
fan of sample based music, big fan of jazz, you know,
Yeah.
funk, yeah.
Yeah, well, you've definitely landed some good cover arts, man.
Appreciate it, yeah.
Marlon Craft, I mean, many different artists.
Yeah.
And it is a different approach when you pick up that camera and you're aware that somebody is going to be digging through your archives one day and be looking at these photos. It's something that has motivated me throughout my journey as well. And it's also reassuring because even the book we were looking at, Contact High, earlier,
Yeah.
you see that a lot of these old photos get dug up and people are so appreciative to see
man.
these moments, you know? So even when I take certain photos or I capture certain moments, and, you know, we're living in a social media age where you share something and
It disappears.
it disappears.
Yep.
And it may not pop, or the receiving of it may not be tangibly felt because people are just hitting the like button. It's hard to gauge in modern times sometimes how your current work is being received. But we know from doing the research and the knowledge, and someone like you enjoying these past cover arts and such, that you're working on a legacy and a catalog and a portfolio that is going to be received in a beautiful way with the context of the rest of your work in the future, you know? And yeah, man, your tenacity is something that I'm inspired by, and I think a lot of
Appreciate it,
other
man.
photographers are inspired by.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. And I feel like to be able to both tackle the stills to the motion picture is a beast in and of itself, because as you said, you don't like to work on 9 things at a time. You gotta go hone in on one thing. I feel the same way. And I've realized on my path, something that I've had a lot of difficulty with personally is shooting videos and stills at the same time in my life, because the videos take a lot of time.
It takes us so much time.
Yeah. So how has your video journey been, even outside of music videos, including music videos, but not only?
I'm feeling to get back into it now because I feel like I've kind of got to a level of mastery in still work where I could take a pause and get back in. Some people don't even know me for video work, and it's crazy because I'm just like, you have like, that was what I was known for. I was known for just DP.
Yep.
Oh, like, well, like anybody reached out to me, yo, we love your DP work. We love, So for me, it's like, wow, like a lot of people don't know. They don't know about my video work. So I'm just like, I'm at the point where I'm just like, I really, really need to get back to doing like cinema stuff.
Yeah.
But I want to do it differently because we live in a day and age where stuff is received and digested differently. There's no such thing as long format work anymore. Short form is king, right? Short form's going to be king for a while, right? So we're in a weird phase where, 30-minute pieces don't kind of, they're kind of cool. Like people can't sit for an hour unless it's like a blockbuster.
For sure.
So for me, I'm trying to find the formula that lives in short format work. And that's where I think I want to live because no one's really touched like short format work like in cinema wise.
Yes, on a cinematic level.
It's very uncharted waters, and I kind of want to go into uncharted waters because it's cool to be the first,
of course,
or one of the first, because there's so many. The world is so vast, you can't really put a stake. But like I'm definitely feeling it now because I'm just like there are times where I'll take a break from shooting and I'll just watch movies, and I'm feeling the inspiration to not hop behind the cinema camera, but to more so direct, right? And just be that leader and the visionary in that aspect.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree more, man. And I think something that will push any passionate cinematographer into that direction is doing a ton of music videos because you eventually want to use what you've learned during these years for something a little bit more thematic and a little bit more maybe with more of a narrative. And I know music videos is something we both have done a lot of. And even just a couple of weeks ago, we were joking about the process you go through as
working
a director.
With an artist and stuff.
Yeah, and just having to make revisions and sometimes the vision not matching up.
And gets lost in translation, yep.
Yeah, completely. And that conversation we had together, as short as it was, left me thinking actually pretty deeply about the importance of being in full control of your art, even if you're working for another client. And as we were just coming here today, you were discussing how certain artists you've worked with have given you full creative control, even when they're hiring you. And I feel you have to reach a certain level for artists to trust you in that sense.
It takes a while. It's always a time game because you have to put in the work. So whether you're working with an artist for the first time and they give you full creative control, that's because you put the work in the past, right? So they know you have you have a catalog, a repertoire, you have a rep. And for me, I always picture that for that, whether it's corporate work, commercial, whatever it is, I want 100% full creative control. So I can bloom, like for me, I can't work under a microscope. Can't. It's very hard. Working with deadlines is great. It's good for me. I know how, that's fine. But when it comes to my creative process and the way I digest just approaching my work, I have to have creative control.
And it's not only for yourself, it's actually for the client.
It's for the client
as well. So you could actually attack the job as best as you can and yield the best result because it's not an arrogant thing to know that you have a vision that you want to execute for this person. It's the reason why they should be hiring
you. Yep.
Yeah. So something I've had to navigate and learn as well, and something that has pushed me into want to do more documentary film, narrative film stuff, and lean towards projects and lean towards handling my career as a photographer and cinematographer in a way in which I can have full creative control in anything I do.
Yeah.
And something not to be taken for granted.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah.
So switching gears, man, which I think a lot of our listeners may be surprised unless they know you personally. You are someone who has a deep passion for mixed martial arts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And from being someone, I would say an outsider who has studied a lot of MMA, but has not spent 1 minute on the mat. You know, I used to wrestle in high school and middle school. But for someone who studied the philosophy and has received a tremendous amount of tools and inspiration just by reading and watching documentaries and such, I know for someone such as yourself who has spent a lot of time in the mat and who has dedicated a lot of time in your life to this practice, that everything you've learned has translated to every other discipline in your life.
It's one river, it's one stream. Same thing. Martial arts for me is kind of like a lifestyle, right? Martial arts in this day and age has kind of not say martial arts as the broad picture, but like the commercial version of martial arts, which most people receive it as just like the MMA sport, like UFC, you know, stuff like that, right? It's kind of like Spartan type of. It's been broken down into this, you know, brawl, Spartan,
brute,
you know, very gladiator style form of it. And that exists in martial arts. But for me, it's more spiritual work because you learn very quickly on the mat who you really are, right? You learn your strengths and your weaknesses from the first day. And for me, I normally excel at a lot of things I put my mind to, but martial arts was that bump on the road that kind of like had me take a good look at myself. You know, here's one great example. My professor, my jiu-jitsu professor, Brazilian jiu-jitsu professor, I have a thing to want to rush the process, right? Patience has always been a thing that I've struggled with, right? Just having the patience for things to come and develop and blossom, right? But with jiu-jitsu, you have to have patience and you have to have the tenacity as well as the grit to keep persevering, and you're taking a beating, right? Yeah. You are going to take a beating from white belt, preferably all the way until you hit purple.
There's
right?
no way out of it.
There's no way out of it, right? There will always be someone better and more knowledgeable than you out there. And for me to kind of like take that in and really take a closer look at me and say, I'm not the best here. I'm not one of the best here. I'm not close to being one of the best here, right? It's humbling. It's very humbling. So it kind of changed my perspective on life, really. You know, like martial arts has a deep, what's the word? It's deeply rooted in spiritual practices.
Yes, completely.
And that's kind of what reaches to me because, you know, I meditate often, daily, twice a day. And for me, it was the same thing. Like meditation is repetition.
Yes.
Over and over. People say, I don't meditate well. Well, how many times do you do it? You know, it's like lifting weights. You just can't go and lift a 90-pound weight. Yeah. You have to work your way up to it. And the same thing with martial arts is repetition. So when you constantly like work with stuff, right, and you're constantly doing it almost every day or on a set schedule, it kind of just translates to every side of your life.
Of course. Yeah, there's no avoiding it at that point. I feel like any deep discipline of any sort, the spiritual dimension of it is actually what's most important because that's what's going to provide you the broad reaching effects that we're discussing into every other avenue of your life. And we see it often in MMA, but also with other traditions, you know, meditation or yoga, that once you get into that discipline of training that muscle, as you speak to, that it translates into how you handle a conflict with your partner.
Yep.
How you handle trouble in the streets if something happens.
100%.
You know,
100%.
It's all applicable.
Yeah.
And how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah,
that's
man.
the phrase, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And for me, just to be an outsider and to observe some of your journey, and that has been very telling as someone who seeks to find different paths to help me excel in other areas of my life. I think it's something I wanted to discuss to motivate other people to not only maybe look into something physical like MMA, but to find another discipline outside of your immediate craft that can impact not only your other immediate craft, but your life in general.
I think that's important.
Yeah.
I think that's very important. Whether that be swimming, basketball, soccer, drawing, painting, people watching.
Observing.
Like observing, like even that. Like I think that's important because sometimes your craft and always hustling in your craft and being in it constantly, it could kind of like rule over your world.
Yes.
And for you to take full control, it's important to have that breakaway.
Yeah, and usually when you're hustling in your own craft, you're usually, in this day and age, you're doing it by yourself. Whereas when you're in some type of physical or spiritual discipline, you have an elder who has more experience guiding you, which is so important.
Yeah.
And I know that mentorship is something that is very much both important to you and I.
Yeah.
And you, even though you're still a young man, we're both young men, you have already begun the process of mentoring others, mentoring teenagers, even younger ages. And you've worked with an organization called
Educated Little Monsters, from Bushwick, Brooklyn.
And you, I'm sure, have done things on your own as well outside of that. And you've let me know you're working on some other things right now, which are exciting. How has that process been? And not only that, how has you making the decision to mentor others affected your work as you continue to develop yourself now?
It's self-reflection because working with the youth, children, I kind of see myself in them, like not really sure on who you are. You want to try a little bit of this, a little bit of that, kind of like that drifting, that drifting period in your life. But it's important to know because, when wood drifts on water, there's always still a set path,
Yes.
So things are always going to continuously keep flowing. So for me, I like to think of myself as the river. So it doesn't matter if they take a pit stop here or if they go over here or if they branch off into another river. It's still one continuous flow, right? And that repetition of water and that cycle is great because I was once in that position. I once had a mentor, like I had someone, several mentors looking over me and constantly looking out for me. And for me, it's kind of like even brushing up on my, my knowledge on things. I have to go back and like for me, because when I shoot, everything's automatic now. It's a second muscle, so I can shoot. And people are like, how you do that? And just to break that down for where it's digestible for children and then for like young adults and teens, it takes studying. So now I find myself relearning videos. I'm on YouTube again.
You have to find the language to be able to teach it.
You have to find the language to teach it.
It's ineffable,
Yep, it's an involuntary muscle for us. So yeah, it's a learning experience for me.
Yeah.
They're learning photography and, motion work from me. And I'm learning how to reconnect with that side again.
Yes, for sure, man. I've always said that an effective teacher is an active student. And I've been studying mentorship on just a pretty broad level lately, and on a spiritual level and on a community level. And you see time and time again that to mentor someone is to receive just as much as you're giving to the mentee. And a lot of people our age feel like they may not be old enough to mentor somebody else or ready enough. But there's an awesome dude named Michael Mead who I've been reading a lot, right? And he speaks about something called mentoring moments. So that sometimes you may mentor somebody for a brief moment. It may not be a multi-year partnership or something. And I feel like that's something that young men and women of our age are able to offer to other people, whether or not they're our official mentee or not. And I think it's important to see how sharp we are ourselves because, as you said, once you need to articulate it into a language, you have to really go back and do the study.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, because you can't just say, this is how I do it. Do it like me.
Yeah.
You kind of got to describe the process behind it. And I'm sure working with children, you've become a lot sharper in your own work.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. You have to really be on point, because they're full of questions that you can never even think of, like they're going to hit you at all different types of angles, and you have to be ready for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Whether that's in photography or something non-related.
Yeah.
That's important. And just to double back on what you said, like, some people our age don't feel like they're in a position to mentor. I don't quite agree with that sometimes because I feel like your experience is only unique to you, right? So, our experiences, we're parallel, but our experiences are different. We hit different bumps on the road, and so I will always be able to learn from you, always. A brief conversation, like you said, can go a long way.
Of course.
I highly believe that everyone has something to bring to the table.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. And I think it's the perception that many people our age feel, that I also don't necessarily agree with, that everyone has something to teach. It's the nature and cycle of how humans grow together. Especially if you are a parent or have younger siblings, you see how much you learn from people who are many years younger than you.
Yeah.
And man, this journey of not only being a photographer or cinematographer, but being an overall artist and young man or young woman in this day and age that we're living in, I feel like it requires community. And it requires friendships, conversations, mentorship. And something I see shine through your work is that you have taken the time to forge relationships with many different artists, many different models, different people. And relationships are what lead to powerful work and to that level of intimacy. And that's something that I think about when I see some of your work, is that, wow, this person behind the lens looks really comfortable. They trust Sen. Even sometimes, you're doing indoor work in a studio. It may be very up close. It may be a very emotional, even set, the way the light design is and what's around. But I always see this level of trust, as you say, from the other person. And how would you say you cultivate that?
You have to be a people person. Sometimes a lot of people say I'm not a people person, but when I pick up the camera, I don't know. It's like the camera for me was, in the beginning, it was a shield, right? But towards, like, as I grew with it, it became more so a way, my device translator, So sometimes for me, I like to spend time with my subjects. Either we go get something to eat, we have a conversation.
Yes.
But then there are times where I don't have, a lot of time for that, right? There are moments where I don't have that. For me, it's all account. I will if I have 15 minutes with, like, let's say a subject, right, or an hour a subject, 20 minutes is going to be a lot of the talking, I'll do a lighting setup, etc. Let's say if I'm doing, like, commercial portraits and it's with an artist, right, who's, sponsoring it or something, right? I will have the set up, and when they sit down, how's your day going? I like to get up and, really close and personal, and it all matters to me, because being comfortable with a photographer, comfortability is the key to everything. And I learned that from photographer Joey Lawrence, right? Joey L's work it's all intimate, and just through watching his work, you have to spend time with people. You just can't just come in, shoot, pose. I see photographers on set, because everything's digital now, so they tether it, they put it up to the computer, and they're clicking very fast, so the lights are going off, and they're catching moments, right? Which is an art in itself. But for me, the process is, if I'm having an hour with you, I want 5 photographs, solid, that will live forever. Like, my work needs to be able to sit and really speak, and I want to be able to touch that person's soul.
Yes.
So for me, it's a skill I'm not able to quite explain to the best of my abilities, but it's just having a conversation and connecting with someone, and asking someone how their day was, or how was your ride over here?
Of course.
You know, did you eat yet?
Yeah.
You know, like, you want some water? Like, okay, like, as long, and I always tell my subjects, I need you 100% comfortable, right? So take a deep breath, relax. If the pose I suggest is not, you know, quite to your natural, your body and how it feels, don't do it, you know, because at the end of the day, I win when you're comfortable.
Of course.
Yeah.
I feel like it's as simple as pure presence, really showing the person that you're there with them. You're not thinking about the outcome. You're not thinking about how am I going to take this photo and then contact the editor of this magazine to land this big publication or something. For me, it's presence, because if we're photographing other people's eyes specifically and their face, and we're taking a portrait, any amount of discomfort, as you say,
it shows
right away.
It's in the eyes.
Yeah, and
it's
the person who sees it knows, like, oh, that person, even if they can't articulate it, they say, oh, something looks off in this photo. Yep. So I think when you do the opposite and make them comfortable, you really see it.
Yep.
Wow. So I feel like you are someone who is always looking for another opportunity to excel, to grow. I'm very curious what's next for you.
I'm not sure. I'm going with the flow right now. You know, like, I have some goals in mind, some people who I wish to work with. There's some artists that I wish to work with. I do plan on releasing a book in the near future.
Beautiful. And have you started working on that book already?
I've started working on it. I started back in 2015, but for me, it's more of a life project than a time-based project where you have to get it out, you know. So it'll come when it's ready to, you know, come into fruition.
No doubt.
But I'm not entirely sure what's next. We'll see where life takes me. Yeah. I do plan on continuing to grow within photography. I do plan on continuing to teach. Hopefully I can become a professor one day.
Yeah. You'd be a great professor, man.
Thank you. But those are like small little pits and stops that I wish to have. Maybe I'll go into like more graphic design. Who knows? I'm interested in different, you know, forms of art and media. Yeah. And hopefully I can express that in my artwork, you know, in the near future.
Beautiful, man. One more thing I want to touch on is the subject of workflow. And maybe even get a little bit more technical for those who are maybe seeking that kind of information. But for you, without giving away any secrets or personal workflow, what do you do before you sit down to edit, let's say photos specifically? What do you do beforehand, and how do you tackle that process, especially when you may have taken a lot of photos? Something I know many photographers deal with is when you have a range of great photos, you have to go through selection, you have to go through editing. What is a bit of your process?
It's interesting because now I changed up my workflow slightly. So I use this example. I did a photo shoot with a model on the beach maybe 2.5 weeks ago. We've maybe shot like 500 photographs, right? Wow. And out of that 500, I have 5, right?
Yep.
And my 5 solid, it comes from, you know, their technical side. So is the photograph balance? How's the weight of the photograph? You know, the color, the mood, the tone, you know, is everything visually pleasing? What's the visual rhythm, you know, of the photograph? You know, there's that technical side. You know, I always look through my work on Bridge, right? When it's portraits and I'm looking to do like very intimate stuff, I've always edited on Photoshop, so from Bridge to Photoshop. But when I'm going through that, it's the eyes. Yeah, I'm looking for something in the eyes. I can't quite explain it, but I know what it is when I see it, and it's kind of like this connection that draws you in. What I do quite differently now is I don't leave that process up to me solely. I may do like a Zoom call and share my screen with the client. Wow. And I'll go through it, and I'll you know, they'll say something, I'm like, I disagree with that, but I'll highlight it, you know? Yeah. And that is kind of good for me because there are times where your client may see something you may not. I know some photographers are not really comfortable with that, but it's a learning experience for me.
It is.
It's a learning experience for me. So for me, that's kind of like my workflow. That's like predominantly how I like to choose my work.
Yeah.
It has to be like, I need at least a solid 5. I can get 10.
Yeah.
That's great. But yeah.
That's good, man. I mean, really to even aim for a solid 5 that can stand the test of time and that the client can be happy with is a big achievement.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more about humbling yourself and showing the work to a client and receiving a different perspective.
Yep.
You know, I just came back from a trip with my girlfriend and I was handing her my camera many times to take some photos. And I was so impressed by, and also even sometimes embarrassed at the photo she would take that I did not see that angle at all. Like didn't even pop in my mind. And I was actually thinking about that just a couple of days ago, how much of a blessing that is. I'm sure you see it working with your students.
Yep.
That these different perspectives all help you reorient yourself and how you want to photograph in the future.
Yep.
And that's something I want to incorporate more into my workflow, as well as sharing the bulk photos a bit more and getting some advice, whether or not we agree with it or not.
Yeah, you have to be in a good place, and you have to be comfortable with that. You have to be comfortable with yourself, like yourself as an artist. And just because someone disagrees with you and says, I don't like this photograph because this and that and the other, right? That doesn't really, it's not really a hit to your ego or your artwork or what you think is beautiful or not. It's really just a learning experience. And for me, it's helped me, I didn't look at it in this way. Maybe I could frame this way next time.
Of course.
Or if I work with you again, now we have a rapport where we kind of work with each other very nicely and start there's some flow there.
Yeah, which is so important, man.
Yeah.
So to wrap up, I've been asking a couple of the other guests the same questions, but who are some artists, some inspirations? It could be authors, photographers, painters, whoever that you are currently being inspired by. Maybe 2 or 3.
Well, off the top, Chimo Do, Jonathan Mannion, Ron Frick, Chiva, Emmanuel Lubusky. Chiva's like all time favorite. I met one of them, Bradford Young. Bradford Young is a cinematographer. Love his work. Like the way he works with dark skin tones is buttery, man. It's like
just easy to do.
It's not easy at all, especially shooting on film. Like,
of course,
I can go for hours and talk about how good his work is. But Bradford Young, Christopher Doyle, a couple of other people, Andrew Dosunmu. Who else is there? There's a few other noteworthy names. Even Jordan Peele, like Jordan Peele's work, his work in terms of writing.
Yeah,
very good work.
Have you seen Lovecraft Country?
I'm a big fan of Lovecraft Country.
I just started it. I'm 3 episodes in.
Yeah, I'm on episode 3. Yeah,
me too, man. Last night, at first I wasn't sold, and then I was like, whoa.
Amazing. It's amazing. The writing is just like how he ties things in, the little like hidden.
The Easter eggs are crazy, man. For people who like little Easter eggs and stuff. There's so much stuff like hidden beneath the surface. But don't, man. I mean, you gave a lot of people that's a lot of people can go look up now.
If you can, please check out Bradford Young. Bradford Young is a he's a young cinematographer, right, for his age, for what he's achieved. But 2, he's he's a cinematographer of color, and just that is very important to me because that narrative is not told. It's not, and he's in the commercial. He's done Disney movies. People don't know his story. So I think that's something that people should definitely look at for. Check.
I think so as well, man. That's very important because, as you say, to shoot darker skin tones on film is very difficult. And people don't know the racist backstory to that. Even is that
very difficult.
The film stocks were created not for
dark skin tones.
Man. So there's a lot of deep history, and it's worth spending time researching those who are doing it right nowadays because they deserve the shine. Yeah, they do. Yeah. So thank you for shouting homie out. I'm definitely going to do the knowledge on him. Yeah. Okay. Secondly, what is something you do every day, which you kind of alluded to already, but you can repeat it or say something else. Something you do every day that you would consider ceremonial or ritualistic, or something to get your mind right in order to be the most optimal Sen can be.
Meditation is the biggest thing in my life that I could think of. I meditate early in the morning. As soon as I wake up, that's the first thing I do. In my meditations, I normally have a script, and, I always, try my best to talk to the Supreme Being and, be thankful for, my experiences in life. And then at night, I always do the same thing. I review my goal list, things I want to have 10 years from now, things I want to accomplish a year from now. And I visualize it as I meditate at night so I could take it into my dreams and act it out the next day. So that meditation ritual continuously, that works for me. One, it keeps me calm. It keeps me level-headed. And meditation is great. We can get into it about how it explains, white matter in your brain. Yes. And, it's great. But that's my predominant ritual. Just in the morning, as soon as I wake up, 5-10 minutes, sometimes 15. And then at night for like 30 minutes, 45 minutes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think utilizing the power and mystery of the subconscious is one of the biggest tools we have in our toolbox when it comes to being a human and spiritual being. And
it's free.
It's free.
Yeah,
and
it's
not
free.
Only that, it's the most powerful thing.
It's the powerful thing you could possibly do. Yep.
And let's sit on that for a bit, actually, just for a moment or two. Your practice of visualization, your practice of putting down your goals onto paper. These things sound very basic, but you and I both know many people don't take the time to do them. Even certain times in our lives, we may get stuck in the hustle and, have to come back to these practices. But how have they benefited you?
They changed my life. Like I've been meditating since high school. I've been blessed enough to have a course in high school where they've taught meditation as an extracurricular activity.
Beautiful.
And that's just random, but it's made such an impact on my life that I've never stopped meditating since a young age.
Wow.
My parents have always meditated, and I get that from them. But it's helped me achieve so much, right? Like everything I've ever wanted, I visualized it first. And there are people I have a list of artists, maybe like 100 of them, where I've checked off, and I'll be like, for example, like my brother Sky Zoo, right? Yep. I had Sky Zoo on my list at 15, right? Just being a fan of his work. And I remember being 15 and listening to him in high school and being like, I'm gonna work with that guy. And I would literally just write it down and visualize it when I can. Yeah. Before it was in the shower, because the shower, the water was calming for me. Yep. Right. So I would be in the shower and I'll just meditate, and you just be in that state of mind where I'm seeing my goals. It's helped me accomplish so much, where to the point where I'm like, I forget some of my accomplishments.
Yep.
And sometimes I'm actually learning to live in the moment and not out of it, right? And just enjoy the experience. But meditation has helped me get my emotions together, as well as help me along, with my goals in life.
Beautiful, man. I got chills with you telling the Sky Zoo story, because with my project, the 5th tape that I put out, I spent so many years visualizing the different artists I wanted to make music with. And Sky Zoo was one of them. Yeah. And he was someone I was able to check off the list, Ab Soul, these other people as well, who I was actually very honest with myself saying, I don't know how. Yeah,
you never know how,
you don't
but
know
it just materializes itself.
Yes, completely, man. And if anything, what I want to encourage to people as well listening to this is to write down your goals. As crazy as the crazier they are, the more you should be writing them down.
The more you should write it down, yep.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have a plan, you can't really visualize it. You don't know how. It seems out of reach. It seems something that's impossible. Just write it down. Yeah. And try to revisit it once or twice a day.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more, man.
Yeah.
To wrap up, what is something in your life right now you're trying to master?
Patience. Yeah, patience. My middle name is an African middle name. It's called Meneb, right? So my full name is Senetchut Men Ab Nehti, right? Its meaning means through his joy and following the enlightened ancestors, he shall survive, right? But the Meneb part of my name is patience. And when you break down the philosophy of Meneb could be applied to all aspects of life, right? So, when you're in an argument, do you have Meneb, right? My mother always says that all the time. Where's your Meneb,
Yeah.
I have a spiritual mentor, and every single time something comes up, he always starts with my middle name, Meneb. So patience is something that I'm working with. Having the patience for my career to, grow and stuff. I've accomplished fairly a good amount of goals in my life, but sometimes it doesn't feel fulfilling. I still feel hungry, but it's having the patience to not say I wish I was already, or yes. You have to really be very grateful for time, because time is the motherboard and the mother load of everything. It takes time for things. You don't want to jump the gun. So patience is the biggest thing.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Thank you for having the Meneb
to
have this conversation.
Yeah.
And for me to sit down with a fellow brother, someone who I respect so much, another photographer of color.
Yeah.
It's an honor, man.
Word, bro.
I would love to have you back on Masters of Ceremony sometime.
Appreciate it, man.
Of course. Anytime, brother.
Bless up, bro.
Much love, man.
Yeah.
Peace. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode with Sen. I really hope you guys got to receive some of the information and gems that Sen was dropping here, because I feel like a lot of what he had to share was so insightful and can really help us all change the way we decide to live our lives and work towards our dreams and passions. So if you want to learn more about Sen, you can follow him through all of his social medias and websites, which will be linked in the show notes below. And again, I really appreciate you all taking the time to listen. And if you enjoy, share with a friend, leave a rating, a review. All of it truly does mean so much to me. Thanks a lot. See you all again soon. Peace.